How might you rudely tell someone you want them to leave? You may say, get lost. What do you say when someone is pressuring or nagging you too much? You may say, get off my back. What would you say to someone who's being unrealistic? You may say, get real. How do you ask someone if they understand a situation, often after a detailed or complicated explanation? You may say, get the picture. How might you ask someone to stop doing something that's irritating you? You may say, give it a rest. What do you say to encourage someone to attempt something new? You may say, give it a try. How do you request someone to contact you later? You may say, give me a call. How would you respond if someone asks you to do a task you enjoy? You may say, gladly. What do you say when giving someone permission to proceed? You may say, go ahead. How do you propose splitting the bill at a restaurant? You may say, go 50-50. How do you encourage someone to pursue an opportunity? You may say, go for it. What might you say to motivate someone to achieve their goals? You may say, go get it. What do you say when you want someone to continue their story? You may say, go on, please. How do you ask if someone is moving to a lower floor, typically in an elevator? You may say, going down. How do you ask if someone is moving to a higher floor, typically in an elevator? You may say, going up. How might you describe a result that isn't perfect but is satisfactory? You may say, good enough. How do you acknowledge someone's accomplishment or good news? You may say, good for you. What do you say to someone about to take on a challenging task? You may say, good luck to you. What do you say to wish someone success? You may say, good luck. How might you end a pleasant conversation? You may say, good talking to you.
What do you tell someone who is being immature? You may say, grow up. How do you introduce surprising, exciting, or unexpected news? You may say, guess what? What would you tell a friend who is going through a difficult time? You may say, hang in there. What might you say to suggest someone relax? You may say, hang loose. What do you say when you want someone to wait or hold on? You may say, hang on. What do you say to someone as they leave for work? You may say, have a nice day. What do you say to your friends as they head out for a night on the town? You may say, have fun. How do you inform someone that a particular person failed to attend an event? You may say, he didn't show up. How do you express that a person is no longer important or relevant in your life? You may say, he is history to me. How do you greet someone in English? You may say, hello.
What do you shout when you need assistance urgently? You may say, help me. What do you say when you're offering someone to take what they want? You may say, help yourself. What might you say when giving a gift to someone? You may say, here is something for you. What do you say when handing something to someone? You may say, here you are. What is a casual way to greet someone in English? You may say, hi. What do you say when you want someone to stop what they're doing immediately? You may say, hold it. What do you say when asking someone to wait for a short period? You may say, hold on. How do you ask for someone's opinion or experience, often after sharing your own? You may say, how about you? How do you ask for the size or magnitude of something? You may say, how big is it? How do you ask for the reason or cause of something, especially if it's surprising or unexpected? You may say, how come? How do you ask someone their opinion or feelings about their current location? You may say, how do you like here? How do you ask about someone's well-being or what they've been doing recently? You may say, how have you been? How do you express frustration when someone does not understand or follow your instructions after multiple repetitions? You may say, how many times do I have to say? How do you ask for the quantity or number of something? You may say, how many? How do you ask for the cost or price of something? You may say, how much? How do you ask someone about their holiday or trip? You may say, how was your vacation? How do you ask about the way or method by which something is done? You may say, how? How do you inquire about someone's general well-being or situation? You may say, how's everything? How do you ask someone about their job or professional situation? You may say, how's work? How do you inquire about someone's family members and their well-being? You may say, how's your family?
How do you inquire about someone's family members and their well-being? You may say, how's your family? How do you express your concurrence with someone's opinion? You may say, I agree. How would you express your mild dissatisfaction about something? You may say, I am a little disappointed. What do you say when you're fully prepared for something? You may say, I am all set. How do you inform someone that you already know the information they're telling you? You may say, I am aware of that. What do you say upon returning from a hiatus? You may say, I am back. How would you inform someone that you currently have no money? You may say, I am broke. What do you say when you're on your way to a location? You may say, I am coming. How do you express deep affection or infatuation for a woman? You may say, I am crazy about her. How would you express being moved emotionally by a gesture or event? You may say, I am deeply touched. How do you express extreme tiredness? You may say, I am exhausted.
How do you express extreme tiredness? You may say, I am exhausted. How do you express your annoyance or irritation with a situation? You may say, I am fed up with this. What do you say when you have no commitments or obligations? You may say, I am free. What do you say after eating enough at a meal? You may say, I am full. How do you express that you're starting to feel the need to eat? You may say, I am getting hungry. What do you say to a friend who is moving away? You may say, I am going to miss you. How do you express your admiration for someone's achievements? You may say, I am impressed. How do you inform others that you need to move quickly due to a tight schedule? You may say, I am in a hurry. How do you express your requirement or need for something? You may say, I am in need. How would you describe a vision condition where distant objects appear blurry? You may say, I am nearsighted.
What do you say when you're currently responsible for a task or job? You may say, I am on duty. How would you express an extreme level of fear? You may say, I am scared to death. How do you emphasize the sincerity of your statement? You may say, I am serious. How would you let someone know that you're not in a relationship? You may say, I am single. How do you express regret or ask for forgiveness in English? You may say, I am sorry. How do you dramatically express extreme hunger? You may say, I am starving to death. What do you say after you've eaten to your maximum capacity? You may say, I am stuffed. How do you express your displeasure or distress? You may say, I am upset. How would you indicate your agreement with a likely outcome? You may say, I bet. How do you assure someone you are capable of managing a task or situation? You may say, I can handle it.
How do you express your understanding or recognition of something? You may say, I can tell. How would you express that something is too expensive for your budget? You may say, I can't afford that. How do you express an inability to control a certain behavior or feeling? You may say, I can't help it. How do you express your exasperation or inability to tolerate a situation any further? You may say, I cannot handle it anymore. How do you indicate uncertainty or lack of confirmation about a matter? You may say, I can't say for sure. How do you express strong dislike or intolerance towards something? You may say, I can't stand it. How do you express deep gratitude that is beyond simple thanks? You may say, I can't thank you enough. How do you express that your action was unintentional? You may say, I didn't mean to. How do you express that your statement or action wasn't intended the way it was interpreted? You may say, I didn't mean it. How do you express disbelief in response to surprising news? You may say, I don't believe it. How would you express indifference towards a situation or outcome? You may say, I don't care. How do you express that you don't understand something? You may say, I don't get it. How would you express your dislike for something? You may say, I don't like it. How do you express skepticism about a statement or likelihood of an event? You may say, I doubt it. How do you express your agreement with someone's sentiments? You may say, I feel the same way. How do you indicate your understanding of something? You may say, I get it. How do you explain you didn't find your way to a location? You may say, I got lost. How do you express that there's still a lot of progress to be made? You may say, I have a long way to go. How do you express your decision to stop doing something due to frustration or dissatisfaction? You may say, I have had enough. I quit. How do you express that you don't feel like eating? You may say, I have no appetite.